Welcome to Rooted Realities, where honest talk meets soulful insight. This podcast will guide you through life's ups and downs, offering clarity, courage, and a gentle reminder to give yourself grace. I'm your host, Christmas Miller, holistic health practitioner, life coach, and spiritual mentor. With each episode, I'll blend ancient wisdom with modern insight to inspire you to stay accountable and empowered. So if you're ready to grow from the inside out, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Christmas here, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we're exploring the quiet, destructive power of chaos, not as a spectacle, but chaos as influence, the kind that settles in quietly, shaping your thoughts, energy, and reactions beneath the surface. Chaos isn't new. It's been around since the beginning of time. It's not always shocking, and it certainly ain't random. It's just louder now, more persistent, more strategic. And if you're not anchored, it will pull you into a story you didn't even write. Or it'll drag you back into patterns you thought you outgrown. So today's conversation is about learning how to stay centered, especially when the volume spikes. It's about how to recognize the early signs before it takes over. But let's be clear about this fact about chaos. It's not entertainment, and it's not just noise. It's information. Information about your boundaries, your energy, your choices, and the collective world you're living in. Now, many of you listening might be familiar with chaos in one way or another, but make no mistake about it. No one is immune to chaos and its impact, even if you're the initiator. Remember, energy has no favorites. So you might be asking yourself, why does this matter? Well, it matters because how you understand chaos determines how you respond to it, or how you'll get completely swept up in it. My hope is that you walk away with a perspective and some tools that help you navigate without losing yourself in the process. But before I go any further, I want to clarify what I mean by chaos in this conversation. Because I'm not just talking about a messy house, breaking news, or the loud, obvious drama we all see. I'm talking about the energetic disturbance of chaos and how that affects you, me, all of us collectively. Now, sometimes it's loud and in your face, and other times it's subtle, almost invisible. That subtle, invisible one, it's the most dangerous. Now, there's two forms of chaos we all live with: the chaos the world generates collectively, and the chaos we generate individually through our own thoughts, emotions, patterns, and unhealed places. But chaos can also show up as imbalance or movement that's not aligned with truth or stability. So let's talk about how to recognize chaos first, because most people don't actually see chaos until it arrives. They see the symptoms, they feel the discomfort and even the inconvenience of it. But when you don't name the root of something, you start participating without even realizing it. And that brings me to denial. That's that hope that if you don't acknowledge it, it won't be real. But believe it or not, some of us, we normalize instability because clarity forces us to make decisions we don't feel ready to make. So denial can be one of those reasons or excuses that we're not ready to face or name something. So we tell ourselves a story that keeps the peace on the surface while everything underneath is shifting right from up under our feet. But honestly, that's where clarity is most needed. There's no bigger threat of potential harm than to see the danger, ignore it, and hope it goes away. But that's not the only type of participation. There's another dangerous one, the passive kind, where you do nothing. But let me remind you that not choosing is still a choice. Not acting is still an action. Your silence is still a signal that echoes louder than your voice. So people avoid addressing chaos because they're afraid of conflict, afraid of consequences, or afraid of disrupting the fragile balance they've created. But energetically, that type of passiveness, it feeds the very thing you're trying to stay out of. In other words, avoidance doesn't make chaos go away. It actually gives it more room to grow. Again, energy of any kind doesn't have favorites. But there's another part we don't talk about enough. The chaos over there affecting you over here. There's a story I heard as a child about the angry dog behind the fence in a neighborhood. Every day, that dog would charge at people who walked by that fence, barking, foaming at the mouth, literally trying to free itself to get at the people who walked by. Most of the time, it startled the people who walked by the fence because they didn't see the dog until it came out of nowhere, barking and growling and trying to get to them from behind the metal fence. But the people, after being startled or scared, would regain their composure and keep on walking. Now, this happened every time somebody walked by. It became the norm, so people ignored it. Some thought, oh, that silly old dog, as long as it's behind that fence, it ain't my problem. But one day, the dog got free from behind the fence, and then it became everybody's problem. My point is, the chaos that isn't yours will still impact you anyway, regardless of where it is. It will find its way to you. And this is where the universal principles come in. We live in interconnected fields. Your energy, your environment, your choices, they're all influenced by the world we live in, whether you acknowledge it or not. Collective chaos rearranges internal energy. Sure, you can absolutely turn off your phone. Yes, you can. Even the TV. And yes, you can step away from the noise. But that doesn't mean you're completely separate from what's happening around you. Did you know that even when you consciously disengage, your nervous system continues to register collective stress cues in the environment? Oh, it most certainly does. And this is where most of us get caught off guard. We assume personal chaos is the only kind that matters. You know what I mean. The stuff that's happening behind your closed doors, in your house, with your private life. But in reality, the global current often sets the tone long before anything shows up at your house. So let's talk about that, the part most of us underestimate, the collective systems that manufacture chaos. There's a global machine that produces on a loop, and most of the world is plugged into it without realizing how much it shapes their thoughts, behaviors, and emotional baseline. Modern life is systematized for urgency. We're surrounded by 24-hour news cycles, constant alerts, algorithmic outrage, and emotional contagion. That's right, emotional contagion. And these systems are designed to keep you activated. And I'm not talking about spiritually either. Activated means tapped in, tuned in, and turned on. And what does that look like? The ones who click more, react more, consume more, and stay hooked longer. That's the factory. Nothing spiritual or mystical about it, just simply engineered. But ancient societies understood something deeper. They knew collective chaos wasn't random. It was, and always have been, a sign of imbalance, a signal that something in the pattern had shifted. In Egypt, they called it isfat, a disorder, injustice, when truth and balance, mat, is ignored. In other words, chaos as imbalance made visible. In Sumerian text, the chaos waters, Tiamat, or the deep Abzu, stirred when human choices fell out of alignment with the natural or cosmic order. Again, disruption through misalignment and disconnection. In Vedic traditions, when Raja, the restless, agitating energy, dominates and overwhelms Sattva, clarity and harmony, the result is societal disorder, people reacting instead of discerning. In Mesopotamian traditions, chaos was symbolized by the primordial waters, representing instability that always had to be held in check to maintain order. Look around, folks. Humanity has been struggling with collective imbalance since the beginning of time. These cultures were pointing to the same truth, that collective chaos is a pattern of imbalance, not coincidence. And that pattern is still here today, alive and well. It just looks different. It's more digital, more constant, more amplified. Now, you can't shut down the machine, and you can't unplug the world, but you can stop working the 24-hour shift. In other words, you don't have to absorb everything it produces, respond to everything it pushes at you, or let the collective current dictate your internal state. What you allow in your energy determines what stays in your life. I want you to let that sink in. I'll repeat it. What you allow in your energy determines what stays in your life. Now, the point is simple, and that is chaos is manufactured globally and maintained personally. So let's bring this closer to home. Now, your intuition, your higher self, your body, they speak long before the situation becomes obvious. I've always said, intuition gives you the lay of the land first. Then the evidence shows up later. But most people dismiss the early signals because they expect chaos as a dramatic event, not as a whisper. Those subtle early signs always show up in a variety of ways. Like that heaviness you can't explain, or that friction that shouldn't be there, or a sudden sense of dread, or an unexpected urge to slow down or pay attention. But just like the universe, these moments aren't random. They're internal alarms asking you to pause before you step into something that isn't aligned, or stay alert because something's about to go down and you need to be prepared to take action. But because the warning isn't loud, most people override it. They keep it moving, continue to say, it's fine, as they push through the signals that were meant to protect them. And if you keep doing that, you can end up in a space you really don't want to be in. And this is where being honest with yourself, being open to truth so clarity can surface is vital, because sometimes brutal honesty is mandatory. But you won't even see the chaos if you're committed to a version of reality that keeps you comfortable. Many of us bypass our own intuitive insight because the truth would require a boundary, a decision, or a change they don't feel ready to make. But naming what's happening breaks the spell or delusion that gives that false sense of security. And that's important, because when you call something out for what it is, not what you hoped it would be, you begin to reclaim authority over your energy and your choices. Ancient cultures understood that inner recognition as well, and that was the first line of protection against disorder. And here's a few receipts. Greek teachings held that eidos, the inner conscious, signaled when imbalance was forming. In Yoruba, Ifa, meaning chaos, often enters through ignored messages, misalignment with one's ori, your inner head or destiny, or refusing to just simply heed your intuitive direction. Yes, when you ignored that, that's how chaos enters. Hindu traditions teach that when avida, misperception, clouds your ability to see truth, chaos follows naturally as a correction, not a punishment. Now, these aren't myths, folks. They're reminders that internal awareness is an ancient survival skill. When you start to recognize the signals, the intuition, the discomfort, the imbalance, something else becomes clear. That chaos doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It usually enters through an opening you didn't realize was there. And most of the time, that opening is pain. Because pain changes your clarity. It shifts your grounding, and it makes you more vulnerable to things you would normally catch, question, or walk away from. And that's where the chaos loop begins. Because pain, it's inevitable, but chaos is optional. Pain opens the door, and confusion keeps it open. Confusion is what happens when pain isn't grounded, acknowledged, or named. Once you understand how pain and confusion open the doors to chaos, the next question becomes, how do you stay grounded when the world gets loud? And it will. But you can't silence the world or stop the news. You can't prevent collective energy from surging when global patterns shift. And you certainly can't stop people from behaving out of alignment. But you can decide what frequency runs within you. Mindset is key. And in this context, it isn't about positive thinking or mental reframing. It's a spiritual posture, a form of internal architecture built from focus, discernment, and choice. We all experience our own chaos, but collectively, we amplify it when we don't examine how our inner world adds to the larger field. And this is where the law of one applies, not as a philosophy, but as an energetic reality. What affects the whole touches the individual, and what the individual carries feeds back into the whole. You can pull back your energy, but you can't disconnect from the fabric that connects us all. So managing chaos isn't about control. It's about clarity, alignment, choice, and presence. You don't need to fix every fire. You just need to know what's yours and manage that. Awareness is only half the work. The other half is ownership, not blame, not shame, ownership. So ask yourself, honestly, what do you amplify? What do you silence? What do you ignore even though your body knows better? What do you absorb that was never yours to hold? What do you refuse to see? Because seeing requires change. And where, oh where, are those boundaries thin? And what leaks through when they are? These questions aren't accusations. They're access points. Because when you understand the role you play, even unintentionally, you reclaim your authority. That's when chaos can no longer move through you unchallenged. And that's when it stops dictating your emotional climate or your internal narrative. You see, awareness, it gives you choice. Ownership gives you power. But they only matter if they translate into action, the kind that regulates your energy instead of reacting to the world around you. So I want to give you something that supports regulation and sustainable balance, because that's important. Pattern interruption. So when chaos starts spinning, you stop the momentum. And you do that by pausing the thought, pausing the scrolling, pausing even going into an argument, pausing the internal spiral. Because when you interrupt the pattern, even for 30 seconds, you create space for truth to return. You can just simply close your eyes, take one conscious breath, and ask yourself, is this mine? Or did I pick it up from the collective? And so when I say collective, I'm talking about the world, everything around you, your environment, your house, your work employment, wherever you are engaging with others, the collective. And that's also energetically, not just physically. If it's yours, deal with it, release it, let it go, forgive yourself, commit to making change, and follow through. That helps to disrupt that pattern, doing something different. All you need to do is just notice. Be aware, because awareness alone shifts the field. If you do nothing but become more honest with yourself today, you've already disrupted the pattern. Remember, chaos doesn't need your permission to enter, but it does need your participation to stay. So pay attention. That's your power. That's your protection. And that's how you stay home in yourself, even when the world falls apart. Thank you for listening to Rooted Realities. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others find the show. Your support is greatly appreciated. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook for more updates and new content. Until next time, stay rooted and keep growing.